Between two back-to-back sessions, and welcome to this venue of the Kolkata Literary Meet. The lady who introduced you said you were a game changer, so I think it's only in the fitness of things that one game changer gets to write the biography of another. So you've called this the many lives of Captain Nair. All of us know Captain Nair as the person who gave Indian hospitality the Leela group of hotels. Can you talk us through the title, Many Lives of this incredible man? And before I let Bachi answer, I've been talking about this being the centenary of many people, but it was only when I read the book that I realized that 1921 also can boast of Captain Nair alongside R.K. Lakshman, Sahir Ludhianvi, and of course Shotrajit Ray, who we are celebrating. So this is the fourth centenarian we are celebrating.
So Captain Nair really started off as this poor boy in a nondescript hamlet in Kannur, in Kerala. And then he took the first job that he could get, which was at the army. And he joined as a civilian wireless officer. After that, he got a little tired of the army very soon. And then he began to be part of the cooperative movement because there was still the war and rationing was happening. So he in fact became a supervisor of rationing and became a very idealistic and uncorrupt man, because at that time people were even kind of selling the gunny bags in which these rations were sent, and people would want to take these gunny bags and sell them. And he has actually thrown a wad of notes in the face of the man who was trying to bribe him to give him an extra quota. After that, he became into this great promoter of handlooms, and his father-in-law had a great mill, so he began to be like a sort of a sales agent. And from that, he became into the then he went back to the army. So he did a second stint in the army, and that's when he got married. And his wife, Leela, who I'm sure we'll talk about later, said, you can't be in the army, you can't be saluting all and sundry, please leave the army. So he left the army and then became this promoter of handlooms. And then he became the biggest exporter of ready-made clothes to the US. So he was selling to Gloria Vanderbilt, to Liz Claiborne, to Brooks Brothers, and Tommy Hilfiger. And only at age 65, because he had seen the grandeur of these hotels, that he said, that's where I want to be. So then at age 65, when most people retire, he then started this big chain of hotels.
Yes, so those are the many lives. So before we hit the Leela phase, what about this man, for a country which now sees startups begin every day, companies floating without much effort? It's hard to describe the effort of setting up something, moving on, reinventing something, oneself, getting into an entirely new field. And what strikes me, and we discussed this, is the audacity of this gentleman who moved from the army to entrepreneurship, and within entrepreneurship from one field to another. And he kept meeting these amazing personalities. So can you just talk us through the bit about Khan, Abdul Ghaffar Khan?
Okay. Yes, actually, when you come to Mala, you're absolutely right. Because you see, it's not just tenacity. You have to have this degree of audacity to kind of make it big. And like right through, especially at the end, he was this Johnny come lately. And there were already the established chains of the Taj and the Oberoi, but he still decided to take them on, and he took them on. So you were saying this about people, so in the army, he was this young wireless officer, and he came across Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, and he really took to him. And there's this lovely story that he became great friends with the Khan's sons, and the sons told their mother, Amijan, we must call this friend of ours for dinner. And Amijan was aghast. She says, he's a Hindu, he's probably vegetarian, what will he eat? They said, no, no, just call him. And so here's this young man. He settles down in front of the Dastarkhan and tucks into the beef kebabs. And the sons, instead of looking at him, were looking at the face of their mother in total shock that here's this so-called Hindu, so-called vegetarian who's tucking into not just any kebabs, but beef kebabs. And my favorite audacity, or two favorite audacity stories was, one was, when he wanted to make lace. And again, it was his wife, Leela, who saw lace for the first time and said, we must make lace. Hey, like we must make lace, it's like make appams, So he said, well, for that you needed the looms. Now, you spoke about his mentors, and his biggest mentor was VP Menon. And that too was his mother. His mother kind of got him into the ambit of VP Menon by sending him a very humble jar of prawn pickle through VP Menon's wife. And VP Menon was already the right-hand man of Sardar Patel. He had worked with 3 viceroys, all the leaders of the freedom struggle. And here's this young, officer from the army, goes up to meet him. And then, of course, being a fellow Mallu, yeah. So the Mallu network kicked in, and so VP
It still doesn't fail.
Yes, became into his biggest door opener. So when he decided to so VP Menon told him, if you want to make lace, you have to get the looms. And the looms are only made by this company in Scotland. So he goes to this company, and the man looks at him and he says, who are you? I mean, I don't know you. How can I sell you my lace looms? What will you do with them? So he says, sir, if you don't mind, may I just borrow your telephone? So he picks up, he says, of course, go ahead. So he picks up the telephone, speaks to someone, and says, sir, maybe this gentleman will vouch for me. And who's at the other end? Lord Louis Mountbatten. So he, without batting a lid, has called up Lord Louis Mountbatten, who, of course, VP Menon has already, got into the picture. And so this poor loom maker is kind of almost jumps to attention, when he hears the voice at the other end. So this is the kind of audacity that he really had.
The other thing that struck me through all his various avatars is his ability to befriend people and sweet, silver tongue, as you've called it somewhere in the book. So these qualities, again, in a generation where we introduce ourselves to each other, the ability to charm with one's personality. He was flamboyant. He used to wear suits in outrageous colors, and he used to drive a Rolls Royce. Several Rolls Royces. So was he a man who was unusual for his time? Did you meet him? How did he strike you as a person?
Actually, I never met him. I was called upon to do this book. He died in 2014, and I had to do the book with gunpoint, last year, just before the second lockdown. And I had to finish it for his birth centenary. But, I've really wondered that is it easier to do a book of someone who you haven't physically met, or, easier to do it when you've met him? And I think it kind of works both ways, because if you haven't actually met him, you have to make that extra effort to get that many more stories from that many more people. So that way I did get these wonderful, wonderful stories about him. And you talked about his friendships and really his ability to make friendships across ages, was one of his greatest traits. So he really was completely age neutral in the kind of friendships he did. He was like so much of a friend of his own grandchildren. And when you hear his grandchildren's stories, Vijay Amritraj, one of his biggest friends and his greatest admirers. In fact, Mala, I was kind of convinced to do the book because when they came to me with the idea that will you do it, they came with an audiovisual presentation that Vijay Amritraj had done. And that's when I knew all the things he did and the fact that he had actually promoted Bleeding Madras. Now, Bleeding Madras was the sensational fabric of my youth. you're too young. And all of us kind of wore Bleeding Madras. And when I heard that he was the man who had promoted Bleeding Madras to Brooks Brothers, I said, I have to do this book. So yes, it was this whole thing. And I think, really, Mala, like in a hotel, it's, what is it that makes it? It's not so much the antique silver urns as the gossamer of memories. And it's the kind of memories of this man, the soft cell of this man, which I think really made him into the legend that he became.
Okay, so it wasn't easy. You said he was 65 by the time he decided to get into hotels. So can you talk us through the interesting part when he visits Waldorf Astoria and how, again, we got a little whiff of that audacity when he checks himself into a floor that's higher. Can you just talk us through that whole?
So there's this big textile, first he's met this big textile importer because, he's already been in this field, so that when this big importer comes to India, then the textile commissioner introduces him, and so he decides that this is this very unusual fabric which changes with every wash, which is what Bleeding Madras was. So he sells the idea to him. This man promotes it, and it's sold to Brooks Brothers. Now Brooks Brothers makes up, their whole line of sports jackets and shorts, but they forget to put on the label the fact that do not wash it with other clothes, right? So not only does that fabric change color and change shape, but all the other fabrics which are washed with it change shapes. So now there's this huge, legal argument. But this man, again, with his great sweet talk, says, look, it's not my fault. I have already told you about it. So Brooks Brothers accepts the blame and, takes on the whole thing. But then, long before this whole thing of SWOT, of changing weakness into strength, he then, goes to David Ogilvy, the great, marketing maven, and gives him charge of the campaign. so instead of talking of it as a disadvantage, Ogilvy actually puts it in the tagline and says guaranteed to bleed. So bleeding and running becomes into the plus point. Then because he sold it to Brooks Brothers, he's at a trade fair, and this other gentleman called Bill Axelrod, no relation to Bobby Axelrod of Billions, comes up and says, I will buy your whole yardage. So, but come and meet me in my hotel. Come and meet me where I stay. So Billy or Axelrod, he says, where do you stay? So he says, I stay at the Waldorf Astoria. Excuse me.
Sorry, we've been running you hard with back-to-back sessions.
No, so this man has already done his homework. He's gone to the Waldorf Astoria, tipped all the bellboys, tipped the liftmen. So when he walks in, he gets all the salutes, and then he checks himself into a suite, which is 4 floors higher. So it's not just one upmanship, it's 4 upmanship. And so then when Mr. Axelrod tells him, he says, I've come in, why don't you come to my suite? And he tells him, well, where are you staying? And he says, well, I'm on the 27th floor. And then when he actually meets him, he doesn't talk business. He says, no, talk to me about New York. Talk to me about yourself. And he kind of charms this man. And then he puts his little mantra at the end of it, and he says, when you're out for the big prize, you have to have patience. And you must never seem eager to get the deal. But you must do your homework. So these are 2 things. Don't be too eager, but don't be caught on the wrong foot either. And, charm your adversary, make him feel good about himself, and then you're a shoo-in.
Yes, so be patient is a very good part of, to just step in. The first Leela hotel. So he was caught between 2 chief ministers of Maharashtra, Vasant Dada Patil and A.R. Anthule. And the Urban Ceiling Land Act, I think is what it's called. So though hotels were exempt from it, it was a reason why Antule would keep on saying Dekha Jayega, which was the mantra of the 70s and 80s Sarkari speak. So then he would run to Mr. Patil, who was more favorably inclined to the idea of a hotel at Sahar. And finally, when Patil, so like all businesses of the time, it was serendipity, happenstance, patience, backing the right person, the
Yes.
person you backed making it to the right post. So do you think a lot of things fell into place in that moment before 1983 and the first Leela opening?
Yes, yes. Well, actually, this man, he was very political, I think, again, because he was Kerala and Mallu, if you'll pardon. Actually, I have to be careful because in the last session, I had to talk about how I got into trouble for saying Ghati, to the Maharashtrians and to the Parsis, because I say Baba. And the other day, one gentleman, while I was listening to a session here, he collared me and he said, you keep saying bongs, so, you can get it a little wrong.
So imagine how much trouble I'll be, because whenever you're saying Mallu, I'm grinning from ear to ear.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, so this story about Antole, who again, I think at the behest of the biggies of South Bombay, because here he was building this hotel in the shadow of the new international airport. So he had all that ready custom happening. And he didn't just build any airport hotel. He built an airport hotel which redefined luxury. And airport hotels are like these quickies, wham bam, thank you ma'am. They were like the motels, but he said, that's not what I'm going to build. I'm going to build a hotel which changes the definition of luxury already in a city which has got the Taj and the Oberoi. So, but then Antule, who was really this very corrupt chief minister, and at that time, the whole of the, a lot of cement, there was the cement shortage, and he was making money on every bag of cement. And finally, that whole scam came to light, and he had to leave. So that's the time that then Vasant Patil, who was this other strong man of Maharashtra, he said that, look, I will ensure that when I come back, you're going to build your hotel. And sure enough, he did lay the ground. In fact, it's really funny because when Vasant Dada came in, and he, of course, went to the swearing in, and he went with his garland. And so he said, why have you brought me the garland? Bring me the papers that I have to sign so that your hotel will finally get go ahead permissions. And sure enough, all those permissions were granted. And okay, he built the hotel, he began building the hotel. And it was 4 floors up already. And as his son told me, you needed 55 permissions to build a hotel. So they were constantly going back and forth to Delhi. And one time when they were there, the Indian Express ran this big page 1 story as to how the government was, had broken 14 rules to allow the Nairs to build their hotel, which was really not true. And shall I say that story?
Well, you say your story, I'll say ours. You you can say this story, whatever.
So they came up and they said, this hotel is going to come in the flight path of all the planes, because it was the airport hotel. And he said, look, it's not. And then finally he kind of went to Rajiv Gandhi. Rajiv Gandhi sent Oscar Fernandez, and Oscar Fernandez came back and said, no, it's not at all an issue. But in the meanwhile, a lot of months had been lost, which meant that, every time you delay, your overheads mount. So it was this big story.
Yes, so in Calcutta, when we were comparing notes, we had a similar situation with the Taj Bengal. In the mid-80s, the Taj Bengal was given that land near the Chidiyakhana, the zoo, and there was much concern that the Siberian cranes would come to Calcutta, and this was in that flight path, which was a similar flight path story. And Veer Sanghvi, the famous journalist, said it was almost as though these Siberian cranes would fly all the way from Siberia, right across from, Europe, come into India, fly across India, And just before they hit the Chiriyakhana, they would see Taj Bengal and say, "Oh my God," and turn back and fly back. So it was such an improbable situation that, but this is the way government can speak at times. And it took the sweet talk of Captain Nair there and some wisdom from Jyoti Basu's government here to get those two hotels up and running. But you were talking about the Sobo hotels, the South Bombay hotels, and the blue-blooded hotel groups of India. So each one has the, whether it is Oberoi, Rai Bahadur Oberoi, or it's Captain Nair, each hotelier is a personality in himself when you're starting out your chain and your empire of hotels. So how would you compare Captain Nair, born in Kannur? His heroes were Tacholi Udayan and Aromalunni, and he was on a steady diet of tayyam and all of that. So how would you compare him to the other famous hoteliers of India?
Well, actually, I have done the biography of M.S. Oberoi.
Yes,
that was
indeed.
20 years ago, and somehow, not by design, that was called Dare to Dream, and this is Capture the Dream. That's another story. But it was amazing the number of parallels that I found with a man who was a hotelier at the start of innkeeping, if you like, in India. Simla Hotel, Grand Hotel, all that he had to kind of, again, chutzpah and panache is really what kind of sees these people through. And, just as Oberoi, went up to the British quartermaster here and said, at that time it was World War II, and the soldiers were kind of stopping by in Calcutta on their way to the front, to the Burma front. And he said, "I will go up to the Quartermaster General." And he took had the wisdom to take his English, general manager with him to convince the British Quartermaster General, and said, "Whatever it's costing you to billet these soldiers, I will take 25, whatever it was, annas less." And that's where Oberoi made money hand over fist. Because you see, all the soldiers would have smuggled in a woman with them. And in the morning, they would do this head count and take cash, and then they would have so much money that they couldn't count it, and it would be stuffed into mattresses. And that's where Oberoi made all that money. So in the same way...
So should we be ripping open some of the grand mattresses?
Well, you should, maybe you should. No, but let me tell you that subsequently when he built the Bombay Hotel, it was as if that whole cash cow of the Grand was turning into the white elephant of the Bombay Hotel. And there also it was this audacity. Now we are talking about Oberoi, but there's a similarity. And so there, at that time, the land was under the sea. He had bought the land which was still to be reclaimed. Then, because it was under the sea, he had to build these really deep foundations. He had to have these caissons so that the water did not seep in. He wanted a hotel. We're still talking of Oberoi. He wanted a hotel which was higher than anyone else. So he had to build windows, put in windows which withstood all those winds. So it went into some tremendous cost overrun. And in fact, when his bid was opened, it was like 100 rupees higher per meter than the other lower bid. And Sir Dorab Tata said, "Rai Bahadur, have you gone mad?" And this "have you gone mad" could have applied to everything that Captain Nair did. Because he kept on, getting into further debt when he was told, "Please can you step back in the Bangalore hotel," because he had this deal with Delhi Hutco, who were, they owed him 200 crores, and there was a big, long, drawn-out legal battle, so those 200 crores were stuck, and they said, "Please do not, start toning down the Bangalore hotel," which he built with more rooms than the Taj and the Oberoi combined. Instead, he added more rooms. In the same way, when he went to Udaipur, he was getting into so much trouble because it wasn't just his own cost overruns, but things which were happening around, where his debt was spiraling, and yet he decided to go ahead and build that hotel. And there too, it was like, it was said that, there was the Lake Palace, which was the Taj Hotel, and the fake palace, which was the Oberoi Hotel, which is what it was disparagingly called, till the fake palace began to win all the global awards. And then this man became the palace on at the lake, because then he built it on the shore of the lake. And there too he came across these tremendous, setbacks, because again, everywhere, the environmental lobby will come up and say, now you are breaking the rules. So earlier in Bombay, it was the Urban Land Ceiling Act. In the Goa, he came up against the Coastal Zone Regulation Act. And then here the environmentalists said, you're despoiling the lake. And this was really strange, because at the same time, he was getting all these, he was in fact getting the Maharana Uday Singh Award for Environmental Protection. And this is one hotelier who's really known for the greening of the areas.
Yes.
So it was really so ironic that this man should be pulled up for this. To top it all, once his hotel was built, the lake dried up. So then he had to find another access. So then he had to buy up 3 houses and build an entire motorable road to get to his hotel. So these are the challenges which would really defy a lesser man. But it was that, it's really like what I've said in this thing that, you quote, 2 people really, like Hannibal, who said, we'll find a way or make it. And in this, it was like, King Alfred, who said, the thicker the hay, the easier it is to mow. So it's really the more challenges that you have, the more that you're charged up and you will do it.
So our session is called Krishna's Leela, which is obviously about his chain of hotels, but the chain of hotels is named after his wife. All hoteliers in the audience, I can see one should take note. So yes, so his wife was the one who really enjoyed lovely gardens and manicured, landscapes across the hotel properties they had. So what was the role of Leela Nair in Captain Nair's various business adventures and forays?
Oh, I think he wouldn't have been Captain Nair without Leela Nair. In fact, he wouldn't have been Captain Nair at all, because that's the only venture she stopped him from entering. But, he had admired her as a very self-assured schoolgirl, back in those days, because her father was one of the most prominent people of Kannur. He had started the Kannur Chamber of Commerce. So she was this really self-assured young woman, and he had kind of taken a fancy to her. And for everything, when he wanted to start lace, it was Leela Nair who said, we will go and buy these looms. So it was really when Leela had a will, then Captain Nair had to find the way, And it was also, so he named all his ventures after her. It was Leela Lace. And Leela Lace became into some great fashionable thing where Rajesh Khanna wore a lace shirt for his birthday. And, he had the foresight to sponsor the Miss India competitions. And he was a very flamboyant man. So long before all this page 3 celebrity, he kind of knew where he should be taking the photographs of himself. So there he would be, photographed with the Miss Indias, who then actually went on to win Miss World and, Miss Universe crowns. And so he had done that. And then then of course the army, his wife didn't want him to join. And then Leela, they had got this house where they had the Leela Lace factory, which was in the vicinity of the airport. And Leela actually saw this line of dusty taxis, lining up and making their way to the airport. And she said, look, if there's an airport, there has to be an airport hotel. And that's how he had already nurtured the dream, because he had been wowed by the Waldorf Astoria and the luxury that he'd seen, and he had already kind of collected these NRIs and said, why don't you help me? I will give you a share in the hotels. And, that's what happened. And Leela was really his soulmate, his guiding force, and they were actually yin and yang. As personalities, they were the opposite. Captain Nair was this flamboyant, flashy dresser. As you said, he wore canary yellow linen suits. He went to the most bespoke tailors. Leela was happy with a chanderi sari. But Captain Nair would go to her into the heart of Buleshwar to this little shop and buy the chanderi saris. And she would fly past even her own domestic decisions past him. He would fly past his business decisions past him. And their dining table would be really the hub where a lot of decisions were made. So he would not have been anybody without her. And, he was this, this charming, always beaming from year to year. When I went through the hundreds of photographs of their archive, I found one picture of Leela Nair where she was smiling. And somehow that picture never made it to the book.
Well, he did all the smiling for her. The other about his first hotel, and we'll talk about him coming back to Kerala briefly before throwing it open. The idea of patriotism. He was a very proud Indian. That informed a lot of this desire to do things that seemed impossible. So when he set up the first Leela hotel, he beautified the whole road between the hotel and the airport at his own cost. So people like, entrepreneurship is often seen as something which is all about money and profit. But do you think that made him stand out, and that's something we should learn in this day and age, that we have a strange view of patriotism, which is posting something on social media. But he was someone who actually walked the talk and tried to make a difference in public spaces, in the way he represented India to foreign eyes. Sometimes even, using foreign silver when you had great Indian artisans to speak the language that a foreign tourist would understand.
You're absolutely right. In fact, among my first title choice for the title of the book was Curries and Caviar, because that is what he was really all about. But the second one was for guest and country. So certainly the promotion of the country, Atithi Devo Bhava, that was what was really the mantra behind his hotels. And I think there he stood out between all the other hoteliers, because I don't think there's any other hotel which promotes India in the way that he promoted it. Because see, all his hotels are built, the design of it is about the empire of the place where it is. So in Goa, Goa is okay, beachside, but he had the Vijayanagar Hampi thing. In Bangalore, it was the Mysore Palace. And remember, that he had actually gone to the Dasera procession as a young boy with his uncle. And this was the first time he'd been seen, even crowds like this. And nowhere could he have imagined that he would be sitting in the Darbar Hall, with the Maharaja and the Chief Minister, and the Chief Minister telling him, why don't you build a hotel over here? And that's what he did. In Delhi, there was there had been that many empires, but he then had the whole system of the sandstone, of, Lutyens Delhi. And of course, at Udaipur, he had this whole Udaipur culture, and getting it right to the last degree, because not just any turban, but the Mewar turban. So, you had to get it completely right. So it was not just old India and the heritage which was being showcased, but he wanted to showcase modern India as well. So the whole idea of India as someone with a great heritage and yet ready to take on the 21st century in the kind of service, in the kind of systems, in the degree of luxury, that he brought in, to the point of the right pressure in the shower stalls, having toilet paper that many centimeters or millimeters wider than anybody else. And it is what I call the Goldilocks factor, that it had to be just right. Because all of us who've used five-star hotels know that sometimes the bed is something that you sink into and can't get out of much against your will. So the pillow had to be just the right combination of duck down and duck feathers, so that you didn't get it wrong. So that's all that goes into luxury. So that is what he did. That he showcased both old Indian heritage and, of course, Indian hospitality, you all say. That, of course. But the whole system and the kind of artifacts that he has in his hotel. Thanks a lot also to his daughter-in-law, who scoured all the antique shops, and every hotel has got antiques of that area. So there's a huge amount of, money that is there as part of the inventory.
Should we get a few questions before I ask about his homecoming? Any questions? Yes. Yes, there's one there, and then there's one, huh? Yeah, can we see? Are there any house lights here? I doubt it. There are no house lights. You can dim it, you'll see more. Yeah, yeah.
Should I go?
Lava, yes.
Okay. Bachi, I wanted to ask you. I'm here. Bachi, I'm here. Bachi, yeah. Never mind. You can look in the direction I'm speaking in. I wanted to ask you, so obviously we've heard about how this man was very audacious, he had chutzpah, he was charming. How did he deal with the regulatory conditions of the time? The license Raj and things like that. There, being charming, being audacious, you would have needed to grease palms and things like that. How did he deal with that kind of administrative level of officers and things like that?
Well, in the sense, the way that he befriended politicians and befriended them in every way that politicians get befriended, I think that helped a lot. I think it really did help that he invested maybe in the right kind of politician who cleared many paths for him. And like even in Goa, when this thing, and the point is that he wasn't breaking rules. He really didn't break rules, but we all know that you don't have to break rules to get stymied. So he did manage to do that, and I know that there was one part in the book which didn't actually get published, because I kind of, I won't name the politician. So, but the Pritish Nandi was the person who was the go-between with this politician, and then he stroke she said, okay, we'll see that in fact the CRZ rule has not been broken. But he said it's okay if you're saying, if the environmentalist says that my health club has violated the CRZ rule, I will break it down, and then afterwards you can conduct your inquiry and I will build it again, which is exactly what he did. So then I asked him that, so somebody in the company told me that, so did Mahatma Gandhi help? So I said, Mahatma Gandhi, said, well, Mahatma Gandhi's picture is on the currency notes. So, that's the kind of shorthand in the hotel industry to say that if Mahatma Gandhi has helped, that means the currency notes have helped actually clear the path. But, you must remember, and I'm glad you asked me this, that people like even Captain Nair, who came in late, and people like Oberoi, who were there in the license Raj. They were not in the Make in India Raj and, in the post-liberalization Raj. They were in a time when, more so Oberoi, where India had the begging bowl image. And here was this man who's creating a definition of luxury about a country. He was at the time of PL 480. And, that's why he had to tie up with Sheraton. But he was quite happy to show Sheraton the door when he didn't want to kowtow to what Sheraton said. The same thing happened with Nair. He brought in Four Seasons to show him how to build world-class services. at the Goa hotel. But when Four Seasons got too big for their boots, or rather when his ego was a little bigger than the Four Seasons ego, he said, send them packing. And that's what he did.
Fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, Bachi, I'm here. Yeah, right. It's brilliant. You obviously talked to a lot of people because you said you never met him and he had passed away. So you talked to a lot of people who admired and loved him. But tell me, did you have any negative stories about him at all? I mean, did anybody tell you anything negative, or was it always? I mean, would there be anything like that you would in the book, or or what it was told to you?
You know, you said this, but this is also true about the Oberoi book, that people said, you've not said anything that was negative. And, I spoke to like people who I was not supposed to be talking to, and they also did not have anything negative to say. But as I've said in my, either the forward, the credit line, that, a halo should not be a necessary appendage to a biography. And I think that, I have been very honest because, I mean, this man was out on this great ego trip of building these hotels, of course, to showcase himself, but also to showcase the country. And then he went into this terrible debt spiral, so that was definitely a negative factor, against him. And it was not just him, it was, like I've said in the book, that it's, Shakespeare and Yeats, that one is vaulting ambition that overleapt itself, and Yeats, about things fall apart, the center does not hold. So it was his own totally, this concern, I mean, lack of concern about the bottom line, and then everything that was happening around him and in the whole world, because now he's in globalization. So Lehman Brothers happens, and at the time when he's issued these foreign currency bonds, his company is, the biggest taxpayer in the hotel industry. So he knows that, okay, he can sell these bonds and it's a shoo-in. He'll make enough money. But then Lehman Brothers happens, and nobody then wants to buy these bonds. So, and then the whole economic downturn starts. And the hospitality industry really, when the economy sneezes, it's the hospitality industry which catches a cold first, as used to be said about America. So these were really negative things about him as a business person. And ultimately, this great big dream fell apart. He had to sell it. I mean, he was not alive at the time, but his sons had to sell it to Brookfield.
Okay. We have just time for one quick question. Keep it short, and the answer also has to be short, because our next panel is here, and Jointada has to give the vote of thanks as well.
Hi.
She's there. She's there.
But, yeah.
She's got a halo at any rate.
Thank you. Did writing the Oberoi book make it easier to write another book because it was on hospitality, or was it a completely different exercise?
Oh no, it was definitely easier. And in fact, I had to worry that am I writing too much about Oberoi? And but it was definitely easier because you could make comparisons, you could draw parallels, you could see where where the fault lines were. And in fact, one of the chef, the executive chef, said, there are really only two people who understand hospitality in the hospitality industry, and one is not Rai Bahadur, but PRS Oberoi, his son, and Captain Nair, because they really understood food. And that's why he said, I was never ever asked to cut corners. I could cut costs. And this is also true about Oberoi, where in fact, it is in the Oberoi book that you could cut costs, but you never cut corners. And it's when you've understood one hospitality industry, you do understand, and you can write about, things that matter. And which for me was a great learning from Oberoi book, was that the staff, that you learn to tread this very fine line between friendliness and familiarity. And it is indeed a fine line. So you could see, are these people treading that line or are they not? So maybe in a sense, my having done the Oberoi book was a disadvantage to the Leela book because I could see where they were going wrong and where they were doing it right.
Fabulous. So you can check out all of these points in Capture the Dream by Bachi Karkaria. It's there at the festival bookstore just outside the East Gate. Thank you, Bachi, for a wonderful book and a story of a man who also is celebrating a centenary year and speaks about the time when India was a different India, and yet there was a desire to make it look good and make it look bright and beautiful to the rest of the world. And thank you, Bachi, for doing that to Captain Nair.
And thank you for calling me, and thank you for having this session. And thank you to all my friends in the audience.
Thank you so much for the lovely session. With this, we come to our final session of the Tata Steel Kolkata Literary Meet. We have Abonendra at 150, R. Shivakumar and Jayanto Sengupta discuss the artist's legacy and the collection of his works at Victoria Memorial in conversation with Sujan Mukherjee. A few words about our speakers. R. Shivakumar is an art historian and curator. He has authored over 15 books on modern Indian art and curated several exhibitions. He is professor of art history at Vishwa Bharati Shantiniketan. Up next, we have Jayanto Sengupta, who is currently secretary and curator of the Victoria Memorial Hall, Kolkata, and a former director of the Indian Museum. He is the author of At the Margins, Discourses of Development, Democracy and Religionism in Orissa, and Those Noble Edifices, the Raj Bhavans of Bengal. And finally, we have Sujan, who is a Mellon Foundation postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Calcutta. Can we please have a round of applause for our speakers?